What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Kelly. This is Phillies Stoplight on Pattison, and the Phillies did manage to salvage the final game of their three-game week series in San Francisco against the Giants, and they clobbered the Giants on Wednesday afternoon. That's all well and good, and it shows you what the Phillies can do at their best. Jesus Luzardo was great. You had Bryce Harper have one of the best games, frankly, of his career. Kyle Schwarber hit a 3-run home run. Everything worked yesterday. The problem, I guess, with doing this show after every series as opposed to it being like a daily show is that I don't want to just be prisoner of the moment to the very last game that's been played. And for as impressive as this third game in the series was, the first two to me highlighted everything that is wrong with this roster and how the Phillies are going to have a challenge fixing all the holes they had before the July 31st trade deadline. Game one, they really didn't hit the way that you need to be a contending team. And this has been a theme for much of this season. Bryce Harper got going yesterday, good sign, but had struggled in his return since then. And obviously, for as great as he's been when he's been on the field with the Phillies, has had issues staying on the field during his time with the Phillies. So you have that. Kyle Schwarber is great. I don't know where the Phillies would be without him. It's unthinkable to imagine him not in this lineup next year, so you have that. But there is such little power production outside of what Schwarber does and when Bryce Harper has a big game. Alec Boehm only has 8 home runs this season. He entered the day yesterday with a .279 batting average, and that's kind of what I point to when people say, well, not everybody needs to be a power hitter. That's true, but if you're not going to be a power hitter, you need to be more of an average hitter in my mind. And I guess the frustrating part about Alec Boehm is he's capable of being a power hitter. This is not Ben Revere, no disrespect, but this is not someone that just doesn't have power. When he hits home runs, they're almost all 400 plus feet. He doesn't hit home runs consistently. He's hitting them at a lower clip than he did last year, but he's also not a .305 hitter. So you're kind of caught in between the two things with him. Max Kepler left the game early yesterday with a shin injury. It hasn't worked. I think a lot of people, myself included, were skeptical of the signing, and it's kind of played out that way, that he just has not been an effective player. He's stayed healthy, which has been an issue for him in the past. He just hasn't been very good. Bryson Stott is a tremendous fielder, runs the bases well, hasn't hit much at all this season. So you're at kind of a platoon situation. I think that's fine to have a platoon at second base because Stott does enough to play against righties, and Edmundo Sosa really mashes lefties. So those two together, I think, are fine. But Bryson Stott, surely you were expecting more coming into the season out of him. And just from a big picture sense, it's hard to say he's been a disappointment as a first-round pick because helped you get to a World Series. He's made some really impressive defensive plays at second base, stolen 30 bases in back-to-back years, but just has not developed as a hitter the way you expected. So you have those two. Trey Turner and Nick Castellanos both have 11 home runs, and Turner has been one of the best hitters in the National League. No complaints with his offensive approach. Castellanos has 11 home runs, but again, not really a home run hitter, more of a doubles guy, but not hitting for nearly a high enough average, isn't going to walk much. So it's underwhelming compared to what you're paying for. Brandon Marsh has been much better since coming off the IL. He had a nightmarish month of April. He's got 3 home runs this season, though. And I just think you're in a difficult predicament with this lineup because there are so few impact outfielders available. You talk about some of the guys that could be available. Luis Robert Jr. has been terrible offensively since the start of 2024. Pretty much the same thing with Adolis Garcia. Maybe you take a chance on one of those two guys and a change of scenery helps them rediscover what they once were offensively. But trading for one of them is hardly a sure thing. Byron Buxton is someone that's gotten some traction lately as a possible guy to trade for, and I think it's worth the consideration. But he's played more than 100 games twice in his career. This is his 11th season. He's played more than 100 games twice, and last year when he did it, he played 102. So this is someone, it's not that he's injury prone. He is most seasons spends as much time on the injured list as he does healthy, so I'd be pretty hesitant to part with what it'll likely take to acquire him. And as much as I don't like the idea of moving either Bryce Harper or Kyle Schwarber back to the outfield, as I survey the landscape, I do think it has to be somewhat of a consideration. And a few weeks ago, I thought, no, don't do that under any circumstances. And you are taking a risk with either of their health. You're putting more stress on them physically. Schwarber's barely played the outfield for 2 years. Bryce Harper hasn't played the outfield since the beginning of the 2022 season. And, he's having trouble staying on the field as is. But there are just so few impact guys. If you could open up the DH spot or open up the first base spot, you open the door to Ryan O'Hearn, and maybe it's trading for Eugenio Suarez and sliding Bowman across the diamond. Alternatively, you could trade for Suarez and move Bowman a separate deal. That's possible. I think it would be an upgrade. I think it would be a pretty substantial upgrade. But ideally, you'd still have Bowman in your lineup if there's a way to do that. Josh Naylor's a possibility at first base if that's open, or DH. The problem is he's another lefty. So you would have some other options if you did that, but you are taking the chance. Like 2 years ago when Kyle Schwarber was playing in the field, he was one of the worst fielders. He's slimmed down. He's healthier now. But part of the reason in my mind he's healthier is because he's not playing in the field. So there's a lot to consider. So I look at the lineup, and I think the last few years when you talked about trading for Austin Hayes, or even when you traded for Brandon Marsh, you were looking for a guy to be your 7 or 8 hitter. Right now, I think you're looking for a guy to be your 4 or 5 hitter, and that's not a good position to be in at all. It certainly isn't when it's not even your biggest need on the team. If you talk about needing a middle of the order hitter and that's not even your biggest need on the team, that's kind of a scary spot. The biggest need on the team, or needs with an S I should say, is in the bullpen. Daniel Robert got a chance Wednesday or Tuesday night, didn't go great. I mean, the sliders there, you see some of the stuff, he throws pretty hard, but he didn't show you enough that you trusted him to finish out that inning. Jordan Romano comes on, gets out of the 8th inning, but then is shelled in the 9th inning, and the inside the park home run was a little fluky, but it was fluky because the ball was hit 400 feet and hit off the top of the wall. So a few more feet and it's just a typical 3-run home run. Even in a scenario where maybe Marsh fields out a little better, you're still talking about a double or a triple. Romano had an awful April, but looked dominant in May, and you really felt like he turned the corner. And since then, it's been a real struggle. And I don't know what to make of his future, because typically when a guy has performed like this poorly over a stretch, he's got a ERA over 7, you'd be in DFA territory. The problem is how he pitched in May. Part of you has to look at that and say, is there some way to capture that? The Phillies have so many needs in their bullpen, they're not going to be able to acquire 3 back-end relievers. Is there part of you that's just like, hold on to Romano and see if he can figure it out? Maybe, but you can't bank on him. He's a hope for the best, expect not the best type guy moving forward, I think. Joe Ross, I didn't understand the signing as is. He's got a ERA over 5. They never stretched him out, which I felt like that was his biggest value, is that he could kind of be a swing guy. They don't really need a swing guy because Taijuan Walker's proven to be capable of doing that role. And he hasn't been good in high leverage. So that's really kind of been a wasted signing. Matt Strahm is still effective, but not as effective as last year when he was an all-star. Orion Kerkering, I think you trust him to be like your 3rd or 4th guy out of the bullpen. When he has to be your best reliever, I don't know that I'm there yet. Tanner Banks is kind of the reverse. He's been maybe the best lefty on the team. I mean, I don't know what to make of Jose Alvarado. Obviously, his suspension screwed them, but Banks has obviously been much better than expected, and maybe even as good as Strahm at times this season. It's just, do you trust that? If you're in a high leverage situation in the postseason, are you bringing in Tanner Banks to face Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman? I don't know. So I look around this bullpen, and maybe Jesus Luzardo or Ranger Suarez, one of those two ends up in the bullpen in the postseason. The thing is, though, whoever ends up in the bullpen in the postseason will have been someone that hadn't been pitching particularly well, and the Phillies decided wasn't worthy of one of the top 3 spots in the starting rotation. So, and it's going to be somebody, Ranger Suarez has bullpen experience, but Jesus Luzardo doesn't have much, and you're kind of taking a shot in the dark. I can certainly imagine a scenario where Luzardo or Suarez ends up being a huge bullpen weapon, but it's not going to be like this slam dunk sure thing that they go into the bullpen and they're ready to pitch out of the 9th like David Price in 2008. I think maybe people are banking a little bit too much on that. It's fine if that's like you need one more reliever. The Phillies realistically right now probably need 3 relievers. And because of that, like I see some of the names people talk about, Felix Bautista, Emmanuel Clase, Ryan Helsley. I'm not sure any of them are going to get traded. I definitely don't think Helsley is because the Cardinals are a pretty good team. But if you put all your eggs in that basket, then yeah, you have a great closer, but you still have a real uncertain path in the 7th or 8th inning, especially if you're unsure about what you're getting out of Romano. So you almost need to do a trade or trades where you trade for lesser guys that would maybe be like your 4th best guy in the bullpen and hope they pitch better because you need to trade for multiple of them. Last year they traded for Carlos Estevez, who realistically was probably like their 3rd or 4th best reliever after Strahm and Hoffman. They traded for him. He was okay, not good in the playoffs, and it cost you 2 of your top 10 prospects. What is it going to cost if you have to trade for 2 Carlos Estevez's this year? And what is the alternative but to kind of meet that asking price? I don't know. So this is why, as good as the Phillies played on Wednesday, as well as they played on Wednesday, it's hard for me to take after that series to take a positive approach because you see continued instances where the offense just goes away. Yeah, yesterday if Harper and Schwarber are both hitting home runs, the Phillies are going to win almost every game. But it can't be every game you need each of them to drive in 3 runs because that's just not going to happen sometimes. They're going to go through cold stretches. Harper might get banged up. Harper might need a day off. Whatever the case. And you're just so reliant on them. And the flip side is Zach Wheeler, Jesus Luzardo, Ranger Suarez, they're not going to be perfect all the time. And you've put the starting rotation has put you in a spot where you have maybe a historic starting rotation. The 5th spot's a little bit in flux, but those top 4, especially if Luzardo is pitching like he did on Wednesday, that's about as good as it gets. So you kind of have to go in with that because it's a World Series caliber rotation. You couldn't have a better setup starting rotation-wise for the playoffs. But the lineup and the bullpen are in worse spots than they were the last few years, significantly in my mind. And I think Dave Dombrowski's going to have a difficult time fixing everything that needs to be fixed before the playoffs because there's just so few sellers. We have this idea of the trade deadline. We still treat it like how it was in 2005 when A, teams were less protective of prospects, but B, there were way less playoff spots and teams would go all in and trade away stars at the deadline. More of those trades happen in the offseason because you look around the league right now, there's not really any one team that is going to win 105 games and be this juggernaut where it feels like it's a lock that they win the World Series in the playoffs. So a bunch of teams on the bubble are going to say, we're not selling. And even the teams that are really bad, the Rockies, the White Sox, they don't have guys to sell really. So you're going to make trades, but you're going to pay a premium, and you're going to pay a premium for probably B-level players when in some of these cases you need A-level players. So that's kind of where I'm at. The Phillies will head to San Diego to finish off the first half. It's weird to play your entire season series within a couple weeks, within 1 week really, against the Padres. They had a similar situation with the Cardinals earlier this year. But the Phillies are going to go out with their best. Three starters that all very well could be all-stars. One of them, and Zach Wheeler, is an all-star. Maybe Ranger Suarez and or Christopher Sanchez gets added, although Sanchez is going to pitch Sunday. He's got a 2.59 ERA, certainly deserving of being an all-star in my mind. But even if he was added, would not actually pitch in the game because he's pitching Sunday. Friday, Ranger Suarez is going to open up the series, 1.99 ERA. He's had a heavy workload. They scaled him back a little the last start. This is where he needs to make his money. He needs to prove that he can hold up and be durable throughout the course of the season. A lot of people have asked me, well, people have said Ranger Suarez can go to the bullpen, but if he's pitching this well, you can't do that. And I agree with that, but there's a long time that he needs to prove that he can hold up, because if you get anything like last year's version of Ranger Suarez, you're not starting him in one of those first 3 playoff games, and he becomes the obvious guy to go to the bullpen, and it would certainly throw his free agency into flux in the offseason. So he has a lot to prove down the stretch of this season. Zach Wheeler in Game 2, whether he ends up being the starter in the All-Star game or pitching second, he is somehow, pitching even better than he did in 2021 and 2024 when he finished second in the Cy Young voting. It's like he's peaking right now. This is like as good as it gets. Over his last 5 starts, he's been pretty much perfect. It's probably the closest thing the Phillies have had to Cliff Lee, to what Cliff Lee did in June 2011. Since then, Aaron Nola had an amazing run in the summer of 2018. Wheeler had a great run in like August of 2021. But I don't think anybody's been better than what Zach Wheeler is doing right now. So it will be interesting to see this weekend, and as the season goes along, how this rotation goes, because you have a great rotation. People are going to talk about this as one of the best in the history of the team and one of the best in the last 25 years. The question is whether you're going to have enough in both the starting lineup and in the bullpen to make the best of it in the playoffs. And right now I have serious questions about whether that's going to be the case.